Hi, it's Walter again with Blu-Grit, the Blu-Grit Garage, and my daughter Anna is doing the filming, so now I have my hands free. And we're trying to get 500 subscribers to build a car and go down to the No Name Nationals this September in Sikeston, Missouri. And No Name Nationals is a bunch of YouTubers getting together and showing their stuff, you know, and going down a drag. They have an 8th mile drag strip, a burnout contest, cruises. It's a really good time. So decided to talk about 6-cylinders. I've got a 70 Maverick that we're going to work on to go to the No Name Nationals, and it has all this 6-cylinder stuff. And basically the best way to make a Maverick run in the quarter mile is to add 2 more cylinders. So we're going to try to slap that thing together and put it in. It's a mess now. It was pretty disgustingly dirty. I didn't have time to work on it too much, and it was getting kind of rusty and crusty, so I just sprayed it with this fluid film, which is basically like an undercoating, and it seems to loosen up the rust, and it's doing a good job of not, you know, preventing more. So of course it's a mess to clean up, and don't wipe it before you wire brush it, because it really makes a mess of the garage. That's one of the fails we were talking about.
And
okay.
Me.
Yeah, you were a fail? Okay. No. So we're going to talk about the inline 6. And they had these inline 6s since the early 60s. They put them in Falcons, the early Rancheros that were Falcon based, Mustangs, Torinos, or I should say Fairlanes. They just kind of went all the way up. And this is the small 6. They had a bigger 6. It's a 240 to a 300. That's like the truck engine. You can tell those because they have a side plate where you can get to the lifters. And these engines, if you want to get to the lifters, you have to pull the head. There's no access to the side of the block. So this head is it says C6, so it's a 1966. The C's, I think the way Ford worked it out, the C's were 60s, the B's were 50s, the A's were 40s. The next number is the year, and you know, it keeps going up. Like D would be 70, E's 80, you know, kind of goes on like that. So this is from a 66, and all these 6-cylinders they weren't really built for performance. And if you can look right along here, this is just a log type intake manifold, and it's cast to the head. You cannot separate it. There's an Australian head. You know, Australia had all the neat stuff. So they had an unboltable intake manifold, and what is it? Vintage Inlines is making an aluminum head with a different intake manifold, a bolt-on intake manifold, and their head has all the better valves. You know, flows better. It took care of a lot of the problems, and plus it weighs half as much, so that's pretty nice. So on the 66s, you know, they'll have rail rockers. And this one, if you look, these are adjustable. And I thought that up to 65 were adjustable, so I don't know if somebody ended up making it adjustable by putting an earlier shaft-mounted rocker arm assembly, because most of them just has a ball. It wouldn't have this nut, and there's just the push rod has a ball on both ends down at the lifter and up at the push rod. But this has a cup at the top, and you adjust it with that nut. And just while I have the rail rocker off, it's one of those, if you look at the hole right here on the bottom of the rail rocker, it's kind of a squared off hole. It's one of the typical put a round peg through a square hole. But if you kind of pan up here, that's an oil passage. So the oil pushes up through that slop and goes along the rail and lubricates the rail. And then the very last one, well, I should say first one, this is where the thermostat, this is the front of the engine, has a little block off here and a hole in the bottom, so that's where the drain back is. So it's lubricated, you know, through here. So if you ever have to machine the head and your push rods are a little off and you want to put a shim, you know, to shim this up to make the geometry okay, remember this one has a drain, it has a fill hole, so you don't want to put a washer and block the hole. So what's neat about these adjustable rockers, the inline 6s came with a 144 cubic inch, a 170 cubic inch, and a 200 cubic inch. And then later they had a 250. Now the 250 cubic inch is kind of like the difference between a small block Ford and a 351 Windsor, how they had to raise the deck 1 inch. Well, the 250 has an inch taller deck. So if you wanted to do an adjustable valve train, this shaft-mounted rocker will go right onto the 250. The only problem is the rocker arms, or the push rods, are an inch too short. Also, the 144, I think its block was even shorter than the 170 and 200. And if you have a 144, just put one of the other engines in. You get a lot more power, and you don't have to mess with it. But if you wanted to get an adjustable valve train on a 250, use 427 push rods. The 427 big block push rods is the 1 inch taller, the ball on the bottom that goes into the lifter, and a cup on the top that fits into the little adjustment dealy bob back here. Let's see if I can tighten this down a little bit so it's not flopping around. Now, this is a 200 head. The 250s didn't come out till 1969, and then they went on up. The 200s, what's kind of interesting, is they had this thing from the early 60s, and even the Fox bodies, the four-eyed Fox bodies, the 79, 80, I think 81, you could still get a 250 straight 6 in them. That was pretty nice. So with the log manifold, with the 200s, they have a small opening here. Everything's small, you know, and you can see how small that is. In 1969, for the 250, they widened and made the intake a little bit bigger. And then they you can see the difference. The same thing with the exhaust manifolds. The exhaust manifolds kind of look the same, but they're bigger. So if you have a 200, you can put a 250 exhaust manifold on it. Here's a 200, but the exhaust manifold, this is a small pipe. The exhaust manifold is the pipe is almost like a V8 size pipe coming out on the 250. So you can bolt this right onto the 200 and get a little bit better performance. So the one thing that's kind of screwy though is this is the one style it's the same style carburetor. I don't know why that got bigger. So I don't know if this is aftermarket or what. So it's always the exception to the rule. And the exception to the rule is here's this style carburetor. Now this style carburetor is better, doesn't percolate as much, or this or that. It was supposed to be a improvement. So here's the 250. I would have thought this was the same, but this must be coming off of a 200 because you can see it's smaller. So just by looking at the outside, you don't really know what carburetor you have. Okay, now here's the big ugly. These are pretty small. The 250s I think are a little bit bigger. And the center exhaust is Siamese, so you get a lot of heat. Sometimes there's cracking. Clifford Performance makes a piece that fit in here, and it separated them so you have two holes like that, and it's supposed to increase the performance. I had them in one of my cars, and I guess the tack weld, you're supposed to tack weld it in, it didn't hold, and the thing would just start rattling inside there. So I took it off, and I didn't really notice any improvement. Here's a header for a 200 straight 6, and you can see it's 3-into-1, 3-into-1, so you actually have dual exhaust. If you get a header, make sure you look at the flange right here, how you have that center part right there. Get one like that. I had a header before. Avalanche.
Stop breaking things.
Yeah.
You're supposed to fix it.
Yeah, I had a header before, and it was just the two pipes were Siamese. And then it would crack right where the two pipes were welded, and it would always tick. It drove me nuts. So, okay, to straighten this out, if you don't have ultimate dollars and you can't get the vintage inlines aluminum one with the separate the intake that separates, these are really bad for fuel distribution. The center cylinders get a lot, and these over here lean out. Offenhauser made a intake that you machine this flat, and you bolt this intake on top, and you use 3 of these one-barrel carburetors. And it distributed it, and it helped out, but I have a hard enough time keeping one carburetor adjusted, much less trying to get 3. So all I did was it was a 250, so it's a little wider than this. I just milled it flat, had a plate welded on it, and then I just stuck first I stuck this Holley. It's kind of a race carburetor. I stuck this Holley on there sideways with heat shields, because all the exhaust heat comes up. So, and if you're going to do a heat shield, do 2 if you can. I bolted one underneath somehow, and I bolted aside a stack, and plus I had the insulated gasket. But Hollies, when you take corners hard and they're mounted sideways like that, the fuel spills out. Now this had the choke removed, like I said, it was a race carburetor, but the fuel spills out on left-hand turns. So, I bought the extender kit, the foam baffles, the jet extensions, all this other kind of stuff. It had a bigger arm for the accelerator pump. Nothing worked. So I took a beer can and I cut a hole in the bottom of it and I shoved it over the vent tube. Cut a beer can about that tall, so when it cornered, the fuel would dump into the beer can and then drain alongside there slower. So that was a cheap fix, but the better fix, and you can tell the Holley carburetors, they have the accelerator pump underneath, and the new Holley the regular 2-barrel Holley carburetor, you can't really fit a beer can here. It hits this unless you somehow make an extension, but I don't like putting a lot of loose stuff here. It could fall in while you're driving it. But the one thing I used was a regular Ford V8 carburetor. The one I have on my 6-cylinder, it's a 250 6-cylinder. It's from a Torino, 390 big block Torino, and I don't have any problems with it cornering. When it's cold, it runs good. When it's warm, it runs good. When it's humid, it runs good. It's not finicky like the Hollies were. So if you can get a hold of one of these, that'd be the way to go. Here's another Holley. This is a marine carburetor. I don't know if that would have helped me or not, but just to kind of show you, it's
Sitting on a drill press.
yes, but the vent is kind of different. So okay, so we talked about the manifolds, we talked about this. When buying a header, get the header, it's specific for the engine, because a 200, the starter is halfway up the block on the passenger side. On a 250, it's down low like a V8. So if you have a 250, you can... Sorry, technical issues, the camera shut off. So I'll finish my rambling now. Correction, when I was mentioning the Fox bodies with the straight 6s, they were only available with the 200. They were not available with the 250. So now that I had that straightened out, a couple more carburetor issues. The Hollies, if you can see here, there you go. There's a green accelerator pump diaphragm, and those are good for the alcohol and the fuels. They last a lot longer. And the Hollies, wish Anna was here to point to this stuff, but the Hollies, it's more rectangular, and the Fords are more square on the accelerator pump. And if you let the carburetors run dry, let the car set over the winter, it's hell on the accelerator pumps, and they start leaking. You probably end up having to change one a year. I'm trying to find if I can get a alcohol resistant accelerator pump, but I haven't found one yet. You can just go maybe every few weeks or once a month and take a ketchup bottle and fill up the bowls with fuel. That'd probably help a little bit. And let's see, I've got this adapter here. One thing interesting with this, if you have the 2-barrel, it's 2-barrel to 4-barrel adapter. If you wanted to put a small 4-barrel on the 6-cylinder, but the issue with that is it hits the valve cover. So I just stuck with the 2-barrel. But one thing that was kind of neat with this, when you have a Fox body with a little 4-cylinder and you want to race it or do whatever, I had one, and you can take off the carburetor and take off the EGR plate and bolt this on, and then you can bolt a small 500 CFM Holley 4-barrel, and as long as it's vacuum secondaries, it'll only take what it can take. It's not going to over carburate because it won't have enough vacuum to pull the secondaries. It only pulls as much as it needs. So that's kind of a neat little trick. And I was mentioning the bell housings before. The bell housings, if you have a 250 inline 6, you can bolt basically the V8 bell housing, and you can put a top loader 4-speed, which is what I have in mine. Just as long as you have the right headers, because if you have a 200, I think I mentioned if you have a 200 header, it'll hit the starter on the 250, and vice versa. If you have a 250 header, it doesn't work either. So I think the bell housings are wider on the 200s, on the 250s. So lost my train of thought. If you do switch over to the V8 transmission and everything, you do need to use the 6-cylinder, the 250 6-cylinder flywheel. It's a zero balance flywheel. The V8s are 28 ounce imbalance for the earlier years. So you have to get the zero balance flywheel, and if you're running an automatic, get a zero balance flex plate, and you should be good to go. So, checking my cheat sheets. I think that's about it. So hopefully that helped out some people. I mean, the 6-cylinder is nice for driving around the street. Nice cruiser, decent gas mileage. They're, torquey off the line. But if you try revving it up to, $4,000 or something like that and try to get power, it kind of falls flat after, 3,000, 3,500 RPM. Even with a mild cam, I mean, if you build it, you can get more. But if you're going to spend that kind of money, throw a 302 in it, and as long as you keep the, be conservative with the camshaft, you'll still have some torque. And here's a visual of the comparison between the 200 and the 250 inline sixes. I have two cars side by side. The 200, like I said, right here, it's black. It's painted black, but it's actually narrower right here, and you can see the starter location is part way up the back of the engine. Pretty close to the exhaust manifold. This is a 200, so it is a 7-bolt or 7 main bearing block. The 170 and the 144 were a 4 main bearing block, so these blocks ought to be a lot stiffer. Some people are saying, oh, but it's less friction to use the other blocks. Well, you're losing all your cubic inches too. So if it were me, I'd rather have the bigger block or the more main bearings for support. And then as far as when the exhaust manifold comes down, you can kind of see the pipe is, not too wide. I'm trying to see I'll probably have to get a light here. The motor mount, you'll see the 3 bolts right here that bolt through. This is a 65 mount. And then I have a 1969 engine. The block is date coded 68, but it's a 69 engine. And you can see the motor mounts are different. And if you go down here, I'm only using 2 of the bolts going through. So if you wanted to put a 69 or a 250 engine into the earlier body style, you do have to pull the different motor mount with it. And like I said, only use 2 of the holes. It rotates, it's angled fine and everything. I don't know what the deal is with that. And then you can see the manifold here is quite a bit wider. And let me see if I can get a light. Lighting's kind of bad here. You can see the distance between the starter and the exhaust manifold compared to the 200. So the starter's in the V8 position, and like I said, you can use a V8 bellow housing, V8 transmissions. Like I said, I put a top loader in this thing, and the only difference is 6 cylinders are a 0 balance engine, so you have to have a 0 balance flywheel, which I used the 69 flywheel that came out of it, and the 69 harmonic balancer to get it 0 balance. So, and then you can see the pipe here is pretty much a V8 size pipe. So I mean, if you want a little bit of you can see it's a 68 casting, but most 250s came out in 69. So if you want a little bit better exhaust, you could bolt this manifold on your 200, but you might as well go with the extra cubic inches. The engine is an inch taller. It seems to clear, but I've got this aftermarket air cleaner that kind of might be part of the reason it clears. And you can see I have a double. This is a pretty thick aluminum heat shield here, and a little heat shield there also, because all the heat coming up will percolate your gas. This is the Ford carburetor I mentioned earlier. It seemed to corner better. So there is something, give a shout out to Uncle Tony, Uncle Tony's Garage. I don't have it yet on here. I don't have that much of a problem yet. I autocross, so yeah, it does get hot. I open up the hood between runs. But I know this car has the issue, the 65. And if I drove this a lot, I'd probably have the same issue. But I just put my foot to the floor and unflood it, But on Uncle Tony's Garage, he mentioned about there's a fuel filter that has 3 prongs on it, or 3, an inlet and 2 outlets, or vice versa. And you run another line back to the gas tank, and that'll make it so you don't have that vapor locking up here when it gets hot. All of a sudden you're trying to pump air that doesn't quite work. Part of the problem is that the 200 and the 250 are the same way. The fuel pump is bolted to the block, so you suck a lot of heat. But I mean, if it's pumping and it has some place to go instead of just sitting until it burns, you can pump and it'll burp the air back into the back of the tank. So if you want to get more information on that, like I said, you can check out Uncle Tony's Garage, or I'm sure there's some other people that kind of have basically the same deal, and they actually give you the model number, part number for the fuel filter. You just have to run another line. I was kind of wondering how you tie it into the back, though. I don't know if you can just tee it right where the gas line comes out of the fuel pump or the gas tank. I don't know if you could just put a T there and you kind of dump it back that way, or if you actually have to somehow bring it all the way back up to the let's see, I got this here. I don't know if you have to bring it up into the filler neck somehow. I didn't catch that part. I just hear about returning it to the tank. I mean, if you could just put a T where the rubber line is in the back of the tank, that would seem like that would be a lot easier. That ammo box is weight, because my car was underweight, so you fill it up with wheel weights. So got one up front too. The class have to weigh 3,000 pounds, or 3,180 with the driver. So here's another ammo box. It's not a battery. So I got it right at, 3,020 pounds, but that's kind of off subject. Like I said, I was just trying to show you the differences between the 200 and the 250. And like I said, I didn't mention it before, but if you do want to put one in, you have to get the 250 motor mount, the metal brackets and everything, and then just rotate it and only use 2 of the bolts to the frame. Okay, thank you very much. Hey, proof. She does exist. She is here. She is helping. Not off riding horses this time. So
I like the fun mares.
yeah, well, I like the fun Mustangs, but the ones I don't fall off of. Thanks for watching.